I'm Amanda, a 27-year-old woman who has been estranged from my manipulative stepmother, Diane, for the past 5 years. My story begins much earlier, though. I lost my biological mother, Karen, to childbirth complications when I was just 2. While I have no memories of her, my dad, Mark, always spoke of her as the kindest person he'd ever known. For the first few years after her death, it was just Dad and me. Life was tough, but we managed. Dad worked long hours in construction, and our elderly neighbor, Mrs. Peterson, looked after me after school. Despite the challenges, those years were some of the happiest of my childhood. Everything changed when I was 6. Dad met Diane at a company picnic, and they quickly fell in love. Within a year, they were married, and Diane moved in with her son, Tyler, who was 8 at the time. Initially, I was excited about having a new mom and a big brother, but the reality was starkly different. Diane made it clear that Tyler was her priority. She cooked his favorite meals, helped him with his homework, and attended all his school events, while I was often left to fend for myself. Dad seemed oblivious to the disparity in treatment, or perhaps he didn't want to confront it. I remember one incident when I was about 9. I had a big school project due and needed help. Diane was busy assisting Tyler with his homework, so I asked if she could help me once she was done. She snapped, "Can't you see I'm busy with Tyler? You're old enough to do your own work." I ended up staying up late trying to finish the project on my own. When I showed Dad my C grade, he just told me to try harder next time. As I grew older, the favoritism became more obvious. At 12, I was eager to join the school band and learn the flute. I begged my parents for weeks, promising to do extra chores and get good grades. They finally agreed, but only if I maintained straight A's for an entire semester. I worked incredibly hard and achieved it, only to find out they had already signed Tyler up for guitar lessons with no conditions, despite his average grades. This pattern continued throughout my teenage years. When my sweet 16 approached, I dreamed of a small party with my closest friends at a local pizza place. But Diane convinced Dad it was too expensive and suggested a family dinner at home instead. I was disappointed, but went along with it. Just 2 months later, for Tyler's 18th birthday, they threw him a massive party, inviting half the school and hiring a DJ. One of the most painful moments came when I overheard Diane talking to her sister on the phone. She complained about how difficult I was and said she wished she only had to deal with Tyler. She said, "I know I'm supposed to love her like my own, but it's just not the same. Tyler is my flesh and blood." I ran to my room and cried for hours, but I never told anyone what I heard. The real breaking point came during my senior year. I worked hard and got accepted into my dream college, 4 hours away. I was ecstatic, but Diane immediately pressured me to consider a community college closer to home, arguing it would be cheaper and I could live at home. As usual, Dad backed her up. I stood my ground and insisted on attending my chosen college. That's when everything changed. Diane dropped a bombshell. They couldn't help me financially because they were saving for Tyler's college fund. Tyler, who was 2 years older than me and had mediocre grades, had been bouncing from community college to community college, unable to settle on a major. I was devastated but determined. I applied for every scholarship I could find, took out loans, and worked part-time jobs to make it work. Throughout college, I barely heard from my family. My dad would occasionally send a text on my birthday or at Christmas, but Diane and Tyler never reached out. During my sophomore year, I met my boyfriend Chris, who was 28. He was the first person I truly opened up to about my family situation. Chris was shocked by how I had been treated and encouraged me to stand up for myself. With his support, I began setting boundaries, like not coming home for every holiday and refusing to babysit Tyler's dog whenever they went on vacation. After graduation, Chris and I moved to a city about 6 hours away from my hometown for better job opportunities. I was finally starting to build a life free from the constant comparisons and disappointments of my childhood home. We had been talking about getting engaged, and for the first time, I felt truly happy and secure. Then, last week, I received a call from my dad. He explained that Diane had been diagnosed with a chronic illness and needed someone to help care for her. Tyler, now with his first real job at 29, was too busy to assist. My dad asked if I could move back home to take care of Diane. I was shocked. After years of being treated like a second-class citizen, They expected me to drop everything and come running. I reminded my dad of how I had been treated growing up and told him I couldn't do it. In college, he got angry and called me selfish and ungrateful. He said Diane had always treated me like her own daughter, which couldn't be further from the truth, and that I owed it to her to help in her time of need. I stood my ground and refused. Now I'm getting calls and messages from extended family members saying I'm heartless for abandoning my mother when she needs me the most. Some of them don't even know the full story of how I was treated growing up. My Aunt Carol, Dad's sister, left me a particularly hurtful voicemail, claiming my biological mom would be ashamed of me for turning my back on family. That one stung the most, as I've always wondered what my mom would think of the person I've become. Chris has been supportive of my decision, but I can see the stress is affecting him too. He's been fielding calls from my family when I don't want to talk to them, and it hurts him to see me upset. Part of me questions whether I'm being too harsh. Maybe Diane did the best she could in a tough situation. But then I remember all those nights I cried myself to sleep, feeling unwanted and unloved in my own home, and my resolve strengthens. So Reddit, ate her for refusing to help my stepmother after years of unfair treatment. Update. It's been a week since my initial post, and a lot has happened. First, I want to thank everyone for their supportive comments and advice. They really helped me stay strong in my decision. The day after I posted, I received a call from my Aunt Lisa, Dad's younger sister. Unlike Aunt Carol, Lisa has always been more understanding, though she doesn't know the full extent of what I went through. She gently suggested I reconsider my decision, saying Diane's condition might be worse than I realized. I decided it was time to set the record straight and spent nearly 2 hours on the phone. I was on the phone with Lisa, sharing all the moments of favoritism and unfair treatment I endured growing up. I talked about the college fund situation, the birthday parties, and countless other small incidents that piled up over the years. I even revealed stories I had never shared with anyone, like the time Diane forgot to pick me up from soccer practice when I was 13. I waited for 3 hours in the rain before finally calling Mrs. Peterson to come get me. When I got home, drenched and miserable, Diane barely glanced up from helping Tyler with his science project. I also recounted how I won a statewide essay contest in high school, earning a $500 scholarship and a trip to the state capitol to read my essay in front of the governor. I was ecstatic, but when I shared the news with Diane and Dad, their reaction was lukewarm at best. Diane even suggested I give the scholarship money to Tyler, who was struggling in college. I refused, and that led to an argument where I ended up grounded for a week for being selfish. After I finished, Lisa was quiet for a while. To my surprise, she apologized, saying she had no idea things were that bad. She had always thought I was just being a difficult teenager when I complained about Diane in the past. She promised to talk to my dad and set him straight. True to her word, Lisa must have said something to him because the next day, Dad called me with a completely different tone. He began by apologizing for not standing up for me more when I was younger. He admitted he had been so afraid of rocking the boat with Diane that he often overlooked my needs. He shared things from his perspective that I hadn't known before, explaining that after my mom died, he had been terrified of being a single parent. When he met Diane, he thought she would help stabilize our family. As a lifeline, he felt grateful to her for stepping into a ready-made family, often overlooking her faults. He admitted that he had tried to confront Diane about her treatment of me, but it always ended in huge fights. Eventually, he convinced himself that as long as I had a roof over my head and food on the table, he was doing enough. Just when I started to feel hopeful about our relationship, he ruined it. He said, "I understand why you're upset, but don't you think it's time to let bygones be bygones? Diane really needs help, and you're the only one who can do it." I was stunned. Even after everything, he expected me to come running back. I told him that while I appreciated his apology, it didn't erase years of hurt and neglect. I explained that I had built a life for myself, one I wasn't willing to sacrifice for people who had never prioritized me. He tried to guilt-trip me, saying, "What would your mother think if she knew you were refusing to help family?" That was the last straw. I reminded him that my mother chose to have me, knowing it might cost her life, and I doubted she'd want me to give up my happiness for those who hadn't truly accepted me as family. Before hanging up, I made it clear that while I didn't wish ill on Diane, I wasn't going to be her caretaker. I suggested they consider hiring a professional or asking Tyler to step up. The follow-up was immediate. Tyler, who had been silent until then, began bombarding me with texts, calling me selfish and accusing me of abandoning the family. He even brought up the times he had been there for me, like when he drove me to the hospital after my accident. At 14, Tyler conveniently left out that he complained the whole time and later guilted me into doing his chores for a month as repayment. I blocked his number without responding. Some of my cousins on my dad's side reached out, and opinions are split, some supporting me, others criticizing my decision. My cousin Emily, 25, whom I've always been close to, called to offer her support. She shared that she had felt uncomfortable with how Diane treated me, but didn't know how to speak up as a kid. In contrast, my cousin Michael, 32, sent me a lengthy email listing all the ways I was being ungrateful, insisting that family should come first. I couldn't help but find it ironic since Michael moved across the country years ago and barely keeps in touch. To avoid the drama, I've decided to take a break from social media. Chris has been incredibly supportive throughout all of this, offering to handle any calls from my family and encouraging me to take care of myself. We're even discussing the possibility of moving further away, maybe to a different state, to create more distance from this situation. Reflecting on everything, I realize how much I've grown. 5 years ago, I might have caved under pressure, but now I'm standing firm in my decision. It's not easy, and I have moments of doubt, but I remind myself of the times I felt belittled in my own home, which strengthens my resolve. I'm uncertain about the future of my relationship with my family, but for now, I'm focusing on my well-being and the life I've built. Update: it's been about a month since my last update, and things have taken an unexpected turn. Last week, I received a call from Tyler, and to my surprise, it wasn't to berate me again. Tyler began the conversation by apologizing for his earlier texts, admitting he had acted out of guilt and frustration. As we talked, he opened up about the pressure of being the golden child. He confessed that he never really wanted to go to college, but felt compelled by our parents' expectations. Tyler shared stories that reshaped my understanding of our childhood. He mentioned how Diane often compared him to me behind closed doors, pushing him to try harder because I was excelling academically. He expressed feeling he could never meet her expectations, which contributed to his struggles in college. He also revealed his guilt over Diane's treatment of me. One memory stood out. After I won a scholarship for a summer science program, Diane made a big deal of congratulating me in front of relatives. But once they left, she turned to Tyler and said, "See? This is why you need to apply yourself more. You don't want your stepsister outshining you." Tyler felt terrible, but didn't know how to confront her. Then he dropped a bombshell. Diane had been exaggerating the severity of her illness. While she did have a chronic condition, it wasn't as debilitating as they had portrayed. He revealed that she used her illness to guilt him into moving back home and taking over the family business, something he had no interest in. This revelation made me reflect on the manipulation I'd witnessed from Diane over the years. I never realized it had affected Tyler too. We ended up talking for hours, sharing our experiences and connecting in a way we hadn't before. For years, he apologized for not standing up for me more when we were younger and admitted he often felt uncomfortable with how Diane treated me. After our conversation, Tyler decided to confront our parents about the situation. A few days later, he called to update me on what happened. Apparently, when he accused Diane of exaggerating her illness, she broke down and admitted it. My dad was shocked and angry, feeling betrayed by her deception. This led to a big argument between them. Tyler overheard Diane saying some pretty hurtful things about me, including that she had never wanted me around and only tolerated me for my dad's sake. To his credit, my dad finally defended me. The argument ended with Diane storming out, and now she's staying with her sister, refusing to speak to either Tyler or our dad. As for my dad, Tyler said he's a mess. He's beginning to realize the extent of Diane's manipulation over the years and how it affected his relationship with me. He even asked Tyler if I would be willing to talk to him. I'm conflicted. On one hand, I feel vindicated that the truth is finally out. On the other, I'm angry it took so long for everyone to see Diane for who she really is. I'm considering agreeing to talk to my dad, but I'm not sure if I'm ready to open that door yet. Part of me wants to hear him out, but another part is afraid of being hurt again. For now, I've told Tyler that I need some time to process everything. He understood and promised to keep me updated on the situation at home. This experience has been emotionally draining, but also eye-opening. I'm realizing the family dynamics I grew up with were even more complicated than I thought. While I'm not ready to forgive and forget, I'm cautiously optimistic about the future. Here's a rewritten version of your text. Update on rebuilding relationships with Tyler. It's been 2 months since my last update, and a lot has changed. After much reflection, I decided to meet with my dad. We chose a neutral coffee shop halfway between our homes. The conversation was challenging and emotional. Dad began by sincerely apologizing for his past behavior. He admitted he had let me down as a father and allowed his fear of conflict with Diane to overshadow his responsibilities to me. He revealed that he and Diane are now separated and considering divorce. During our talk, Dad shared things about his relationship with Diane that I hadn't known. He explained that early in their marriage, Diane threatened to leave and take Tyler with her if he ever sided with me. This fear drove him to appease her, often at my expense. He expressed deep regret, realizing how much damage this caused to our relationship. While I appreciated his apology, I made it clear that it wouldn't automatically mend everything. We spent hours discussing the painful events of my childhood and early adulthood. It was difficult to revisit those wounds, but it felt necessary for both of us to move forward. Dad also updated me on the situation with Diane. After her manipulations regarding her illness were uncovered, she moved in with her sister permanently. She continues to refuse to take responsibility, casting herself as the victim. Dad said he has filed for divorce, unable to forgive the years of deception and manipulation. As for Tyler, Dad told me he has moved out and is living with a friend. He's finally pursuing his passion for cooking, something he had always wanted to do, but felt he couldn't because of Diane's expectations. By the end of our meeting, we agreed to slowly start rebuilding our relationship. We're committed to taking this one step at a time. Let's start with weekly phone calls and see how things develop from there. Dad also suggested family therapy for the three of us, him, me, and Tyler, which I'm seriously considering. Since that meeting, things have changed. Dad has been calling regularly, and while our conversations can be a bit awkward, they've been more open and honest than in years. He's genuinely interested in my life, my job, and even Chris. Tyler and I have been talking more often, slowly building the sibling relationship we never had growing up. It feels strange but nice to have him as an ally after all this time. He even invited Chris and me to visit him at the restaurant where he's working as a line cook. The extended family has mostly backed off since they learned the full story. Some have reached out to apologize for their earlier judgments, while others have remained silent. I'm okay with both responses. I've realized I don't need their approval to validate my choices. As for Diane, I haven't heard from her directly, and I'm not sure I want to. Dad mentioned she's been trying to convince Tyler to side with her, but he's sticking to his decision to distance himself from her manipulations. Chris has been my rock throughout all of this, offering incredible patience and support as I process my feelings. He reminds me that it's okay to take things at my own pace. We've decided to put our plans to move further away on hold for now and see how things evolve with Dad and Tyler. Built for myself, this experience has taught me the importance of standing up for myself and not allowing others to dictate my worth. While it's been a difficult journey, I'm proud of myself for staying true to my feelings and needs. Throughout this ordeal, I'm not sure what the future holds, but for the first time in a long time, I'm hopeful. Thank you, Reth, for your support and advice throughout this process. It's meant more to me than I can express.